All right, in this video, we're going to begin Unit 7, and we're going to begin talking about this concept of natural selection, and this is an introduction to that topic. So first, this idea of what is natural selection. It is the mechanism by which evolution occurs. Evolution is a change in the genetic makeup of a population over time. It's supported by multiple lines of evidence. We will be going over those in uh, videos that we'll be looking at later. It's the process by which organisms that, if they have a particular adaptation, they are able to survive. You can see in this picture here, there's a bird that eats mice, and it's going to eat the mice that it can see, right? And so, what would you expect for that population to do over time? It's going to become less visible so that it can survive. This is an adaptation. The mice did not get together and decide that it's time to change color. This is a natural occurrence. And the mice that are more suited to survival will, and they will survive to the next generation. That's the whole idea behind natural selection. Charles Darwin is the one who, of course, came up with some of these ideas. He's credited with the development of this theory, though he built upon the work of other scientists, just like all science does, of course. And he basically said that there are several criteria that must be met in order for these changes to occur. And one of those criteria is called competition. Competition is just the idea that there are resources that are necessary for survival and that those resources are limited. And if there's limited resources, then there will be a struggle for survival. Not everyone in the population will have an equal chance of survival. And that's exactly the idea here. Organisms that are better suited for survival. You look at this picture, the wolf that is stronger is going to win the fight. It's going to get the food. It's going to get the mate. It's going to get the territory, whatever it is that is available and whatever is necessary for survival, it is going to win. And the reason that wolf is bigger, faster, stronger is because of its genetic makeup, which produces a certain phenotype. That genetic makeup is a process of heredity. Why is one wolf smaller and the other wolf bigger? There's variation in population. That's it. It's not because it trained harder. It's not like a Rocky movie. It's natural selection. It it happens naturally, and the bigger wolf is going to be able to pass those genes down to the next generation. That's kind of what the next idea is here. This idea that of favorable adaptations. If you have a favorable adaptation, you are more likely to survive. This snake has a favorable adaptation in that it looks like its surroundings. It is safe from would-be predators, and it is safe from being seen by its prey. And so it can hide and wait until it's ready to eat, and it doesn't have to worry about something coming by and eating it. So that makes sense. This is an adaptation is just essentially a trait that provides an advantage in a particular environment. This snake would not be useful in the Arctic for a lot of reasons, but just color alone, it would stick out. Everything in the Arctic is white because the Arctic is white. And so most things that want to hide in the jungle are green or brown. And so it just makes sense just from a color standpoint. There's a lot of other things going on there too. And you would expect then that the number of organisms with those adaptations would increase over time because those are the more favorable adaptations. A white snake is not going to do very well in that tree. So you would expect this particular species of snakes to mostly be green. And that's going to lead to reproductive success. Um, Evolutionary fitness is ultimately measured by reproductive success, meaning that only those animals that reproduce pass their genes on to the next generation. This concept of fitness refers essentially to of an organism's ability to survive and reproduce. That is the big idea here. It doesn't mean anything if a bear is the strongest bear in the woods if it's unable to pass those genes to the next generation. And it has to be producing fertile offspring that are also reproducing and passing those genes on to subsequent generation. Now, Some of this has to do with the stability of a particular ecosystem. Ecosystems they range in stability. Some ecosystems are very stable, meaning there's not a lot of change in them. Some ecosystems change all the time. Here's a picture of a forest fire. This particular ecosystem, it looks like a boreal forest, burns down about every 50 years. And so it's a relatively stable environment. And so the creatures in that environment probably aren't well adapted to fire. However, there are some ecosystems in which they burn every few years. And so the inhabitants of those ecosystems, whether they be plants or animals, are more adapted to fire. That's just an example of that. Um, there are lots of biotic or living factors and abiotic or non-living factors that can make an ecosystem more or less stable. And if an ecosystem is stable, you can expect those organisms to change less over time. And if an ecosystem is more stable, you can expect a faster rate of adaptability and change to happen in those particular ecosystems. So ecosystem stability has a whole lot to do with the rate of change in evolution. So here's an example of natural selection that has occurred more recently, and it has to do with these crickets that are found on the island of Kauai, which is a Hawaiian island. And male crickets typically make a noise with their wings, and this allows them to find a mate. That's their whole thing. Um, However, this noise also alerts these flies, and these flies come and lay eggs on the male crickets because they can find them, and their eggs hatch and destroy the male cricket, which is not good. There was a mutation in this population in which caused certain individuals of the population to be silent, meaning their wings were unable to make the noise that crickets make that we're all familiar with. Um, those crickets were more likely to survive because they weren't having flies find them and lay eggs on their back. However, they were less likely to reproduce, but it would eventually reproduce over time. And so, what you would expect to happen is where these flies are present, the cricket that makes noise is going to be more prevalent, and where these flies are more prevalent, the animal that is silent is going to be the one that is going to be able to mate and survive to the next generation. And so it just has to do with the ecosystem that is around it, the other organisms, and the interactions that happen with those other organisms. And we're going to be dealing with all of that in the upcoming lectures.